The wind came crawling down from the ridge like a wounded animal, carrying grit sharp enough to peel skin. Holt pushed through it, his coat dragging in the dust, reins wound tight around his fist. The sky was the color of old bone, the kind that remembers violence. A storm was coming. He could smell it in the iron of the air. The horse snorted, uneasy. The wind howled again, low, hungry. He tipped his hat down and leaned forward, boots creaking in the stirrups. The trail to Calder's Rest was a narrow vein of dirt between canyon walls. No birds, no sound but the scrape of wind and the faint clink of the bit. He hadn't spoken all day, didn't see a reason to. The ridge curved, and there, half buried in sand, lay a wagon's splintered wheel. Fresh, the metal hub still warm when his glove touched it. He crouched, scanning the horizon. Something had come through here, fast, stagecoach maybe chased or running scared. Then a sound. Not the storm. Softer. A whimper. Holt turned sharply. At first, he saw nothing but the shifting sand. Then the shape moved. A small figure crouched behind a clump of sage, trembling. The storm swallowed her sob, but her eyes caught the light. A child. She couldn't have been more than 9. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, her hair tangled with grit. She clutched a square of cloth, dark, wet, and heavy-looking. Blood. The wind rose, and the girl stumbled forward, shielding her face. "Sir," her voice cracked. "Sir, can I hide under your coat?" Holt froze. The storm whipped her hair across her face, her little hands shaking as she reached toward him. Behind the wind came something else, hoofbeats. Many. He looked back down the trail. Dark shapes moved through the curtain of sand. Riders, 5, maybe 6, slow and deliberate. The kind of men who didn't rush unless there was blood in it. The girl pressed closer. "Please," she whispered. "They're coming." Holt didn't move for a long breath. Then he swung down from the saddle, coat flaring with the wind. His eyes never left the riders as he stepped in front of the girl. "Get behind me," he said quietly. She obeyed. The hoofbeats grew louder. The storm thickened. Dust and thunder merged until the world became nothing but noise. Through the red haze came their outlines. Men in dusters, faces wrapped in scarves, rifles slung low. The lead rider pulled up and scanned the ridge. "Tracks end here," one shouted. Another spat into the wind. "She can't be gone far. Check that ridge line." They fanned out. Holt stood still, one hand resting on his horse's neck. The girl clung to the back of his coat, her fingers cold against the fabric. One of the riders caught sight of him and nudged his horse forward. "Hey, old man," he barked over the storm. "You seen a girl run through here? Small thing, dirty dress, brown hair." Holt didn't answer. His hat brim shadowed his eyes. The rider came closer, eyes narrowing. "You deaf?" Holt stayed quiet. Another rider laughed behind him. "Leave him. Ain't worth a skin. Look at him. Man's half dust already." They turned their horses, circling, scanning the sand. Holt shifted his stance just enough to block the girl completely. The lead man's gaze lingered on him, suspicious. "You sure you ain't seen her?" Still silence. The storm filled it. The man leaned forward in his saddle. "You keep staring at me like that, friend, I'll take it for disrespect." A moment passed like a drawn bowstring. Then Holt slowly lifted his reins, calm as still water. The horse shifted its weight. The man sneered, spat again, and wheeled his horse around. "Come on, boys. She's gone. Ain't no kid gonna last long out here, anyhow." They rode off, fading into the dust. Holt waited until the sound of hooves was swallowed by the wind. Only then did he lower his hand. The girl still clung to his coat. He looked down. Her eyes were wide, wet, desperate. "You got a name?" he asked. "Mary," she whispered. "Where's your folks, Mary?" Her throat worked as she tried to answer, but no words came. Only a shake of the head, slow and hollow. Holt looked down the ridge again, to where the riders had gone. Lightning cracked behind the clouds, splitting the sky. He turned back to the girl. "Come on." She hesitated, then reached for his hand. He didn't take it, but he started walking, slow and steady, leading the horse by the reins. She followed close, clutching his coat against her cheek like a shield. By the time they reached the low valley, the storm was nearly upon them. Grit hissed against the rocks, the sky dark as a dying fire. Holt guided her toward a small outcropping where stone met shadow. He pulled his coat around her, tucking it tight. The leather was rough, smelling of rain and smoke. "You stay here," he said. She grabbed his sleeve. "They'll find me." His eyes flicked toward the open desert, where the sand whipped in violent spirals. "Not tonight, they won't." He returned to his horse, tying it to a dead limb, checking the rifle slung behind the saddle, but his hand stopped short, hovering over the worn leather grip. He exhaled, long and tired, and let it go. When he came back, the girl was half buried in his coat, trembling. Her small face peeked from the collar, dirt streaking her cheeks. "You cold?" She nodded. He pulled another piece of the coat around her shoulders. "Get some rest. We ride at first light." The girl's eyes fluttered, heavy with exhaustion. "Why you help pin me?" she murmured. He didn't answer. The wind did instead, moaning through the canyon walls like a name long forgotten. Holt settled by the entrance, hat tipped low, watching the storm tear across the desert. He could hear the faint echo of hoofbeats in the distance again. Ghosts or men, he couldn't tell. Thunder rolled, deep and heavy. He looked at the horizon, where the world was red and restless, and for the first time in years, his hand drifted to the place his gun used to hang. Behind him, the girl whispered in her sleep, voice small and broken. "Sir, can I hide under your coat?" He closed his eyes, and the storm swallowed the words whole. The first shot cracked before dawn. It echoed across the valley, sharp as tearing cloth. Holt was already awake, crouched by the window with the rifle in his hands. The girl startled upright near the fire, eyes wide. "Stay down," he muttered. She obeyed, crawling behind a chair. Smoke drifted from the cold hearth, thin, blue, ghostly. Outside, the horizon glowed gray, the storm gone but the air thick with dust. Holt watched two riders on the ridge, their silhouettes still and waiting. The kind of men who watched a house before deciding whether to burn it. Another shot, closer. He lowered the curtain and moved quietly to the door, boots whispering over the wood. The rifle stayed steady, even as his hands shook faintly. "Who are they?" Mary asked, her voice no louder than a breath. "Men who don't quit," he said. He unlatched the door, stepped onto the porch. The boards groaned. The wind had gone still, unnatural still. The only sound now was the buzz of a lone fly somewhere in the dark. Two riders waited near the fence, dusters flapping. Their horses fidgeted, nostrils steaming in the cold air. One raised a hand. "Mornin', friend. You got company." Holt didn't answer. The man smiled. "Little girl run through here last night. Stagecoach robbery. Whole family killed. You seen her?" Holt stood silent. The other rider spat a stream of tobacco. "Ain't polite to ignore the law. The law don't wear masks," Holt said finally. The smile slipped from the man's face. "Careful, old-timer." The wind came back then, rolling through the valley like a whisper of warning. The men turned their horses. "Marshal Bragg'll want a word," the first said. "He don't like ghosts living on his land." When they left, Holt shut the door and bolted it. His breath came slow but heavy. Mary peered from behind the chair. "What'll they do if they find me?" He looked at her, long and hard, then said, "They already did." She clutched the edge of the coat tighter. "They killed my pa." He waited. "They wanted a book," she said. "Pa called it proof. Said it'd fix everything." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "He made me take it when they came." She reached into her dress and pulled out a small leather ledger, its corners stained with old blood. Holt's eyes darkened. "You keep that close. Don't ever show it again." "Why?" "'Cause men kill easy when there's truth involved." He turned back to the window. The riders were gone, but the dust on the horizon wasn't. More would come. Mary crept closer, sitting cross-legged near the fire. The heat cast her face in orange light. "You don't talk much," she said softly. "No need to," Holt replied. "You used to." He didn't answer. Instead, he knelt, poking at the embers with a stick until sparks rose and died. For a moment his eyes reflected them, tiny, red, like memories burning out. Mary studied him. "You were in a war, weren't you?" He looked up slowly. "You're too young to know about war." "I know what guns do," she said. That stopped him. He sat back, staring into the flames. "Yeah," he said finally. "You do." Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying the faint clatter of distant hooves. Holt stood, walked to the corner, and pulled a tarp aside. Beneath it lay a long, dust-covered trunk. The metal latch squealed when he opened it. Inside, old spurs, a U.S. Marshal badge dulled by time, and 2 revolvers wrapped in oiled cloth. Mary watched in silence. He touched the badge once, fingers tracing the faint engraving. Then he shut the lid hard, the sound like a coffin closing. "Was that yours?" He didn't look up. "It belonged to a man who ain't here anymore." "Did he die?" He let out a breath. "Not yet." The hoofbeats grew louder. This time there were more. 5, maybe 6 horses. Holt stepped to the window again, jaw tightening. Mary whispered, "It's them." He nodded once. "Go to the barn. Stay low, stay quiet." She hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll talk. Talk won't stop bullets." He almost smiled. "Ain't planning to stop any." She ran, clutching the ledger to her chest. He watched her vanish through the side door, then turned back as the first rider dismounted outside. Boots hit dirt. Voices murmured. A hard knock rattled the door. Holt opened it slow. Marshal Bragg stood there, a thick man with gray in his beard and rot in his smile. His badge gleamed like mockery. "Morning, Holt," Bragg said. "Didn't know you were still breathing." "Didn't know you cared," Holt replied. Bragg chuckled. "Always had a tongue on you, even after you buried your gun. Tell me, you seen a girl come through here? Small thing, brown hair, probably scared out of her mind." Holt's face was stone. "No." Bragg tilted his head, studying him. "You sure about that? Word in town says you've been talking to yourself up here. Maybe you seen ghosts, huh?" "Could be." Bragg stepped closer, boots crunching in the dirt. "Be a shame if that storm last night tore your fences down. Shame if my boys had to come fix it and found something they shouldn't." Holt didn't blink. Bragg smiled again, colder now. "You used to be somebody, Crow, but that was a long time ago. You stay out of this, you keep breathing. You meddle, you'll wish you'd gone with your family." The air went still. Bragg waited for an answer. None came. He laughed under his breath and turned away, calling to his men. "Mount up. Ain't nothing here but dust." The riders left. Holt closed the door quietly, his shadow long and crooked against the wall. From the barn came a faint sound, a cough, a shift in hay. She was still there, still breathing. He sat by the window again, elbows on his knees, eyes distant. The wind picked up outside, dragging the smell of smoke and gun oil through the cracks. He thought of the trunk, the badge, the guns. Of a name Bragg had spat like poison. Crow. He hadn't heard it in 15 years. Mary crept in, barefoot, clutching his coat around her. "They gone. For now." She looked at him, voice shaking. "Why didn't you fight them?" He stared through her, through the wall, through time. "Because the last time I did, I lost everything worth fighting for." She came closer, resting against the chair leg, her small fingers brushing the hem of his coat. "You think that'll happen again?" He didn't answer. The fire crackled, throwing red light on his weathered face. Outside, the valley settled back into silence. But under it all, the faintest echo lingered, like a gun being cocked somewhere far away, waiting for the right moment to speak. The coyote's cry broke the stillness. Then came the crunch of hooves on gravel. Holt moved to the window without sound, parting the curtain with 2 fingers. Lanterns flickered in the distance. 6, maybe 7 riders spreading through the dark, their firelight bouncing off gunmetal. The moon above them burned red as a wound. Mary stirred on the cot, clutching the ledger to her chest. "They're back," she whispered. He nodded once. "You ride out the canyon before dawn. Keep to the riverbed till it splits, then head west." "I'm not leaving you." He turned from the window, jaw hardening. "You don't get to decide that." Her small chin lifted. "You said they'll kill for the truth, so I'm keeping it safe." The look he gave her could have cracked stone, but it broke before it reached her. He sighed, knelt by the chest in the corner, and unlatched it. The hinges groaned like old bones. Inside lay the twin revolvers, black steel dulled by years of dust. He lifted one slowly, the weight familiar, terrible. A shadow crossed his face as he broke the cylinder open, checked the chambers. Mary watched him wide-eyed. You said you wouldn't. I say a lot of things, he muttered. He set both guns on the table, unwrapped the faded badge beside them. The firelight caught the worn engraving. U.S. Marshal Samuel Holt. Who were you? She whispered. He didn't answer, just strapped on the belt, the leather creaking like it remembered him. Outside, voices rose, men calling to each other, laughter sharp and mean. Marshal Bragg wants the girl alive. Burn the rest. Holt snuffed the lamp, the cabin dropping into darkness. Only the glow from the coals touched his face now, deep lines carved by memory and smoke. Mary, he said quietly, when I tell you to run, you run. The girl hesitated. And you? He looked toward the door. I've been running long enough. The first torch hit the wall a moment later. Flames crawled across the wood like eager fingers. Holt opened the door into the smoke, stepping out slow, both revolvers low at his sides. The red moon hung behind him, huge and watching. A man shouted from the yard. There he is. Gunfire tore through the night. Holt dug behind the trough, bullets sparking off metal. He fired once, clean, deliberate. A rider dropped. Another screamed. The wind rose, carrying the smell of burning pine and gunpowder. From inside the house, Mary cried out, They're everywhere. Stay down, he barked. He moved like he'd never forgotten, fast, silent, death in rhythm. Each shot found a body. The years hadn't dulled him. They honed him. A voice cut through the chaos, Bragg's, loud and mocking. Well, I'll be damned. The crow still remembers how to fly. Holt's jaw tightened. He peeked around the trough. Bragg stood by the corral, revolver drawn, smirking in the torchlight. Where's the girl? Bragg called. You think you can save her? You couldn't even save your own. The words hit harder than lead. Holt stepped from cover, slow, deliberate. Come out, Marshal. Bragg taunted. Let's finish what you started. Holt fired. The shot clipped Bragg's hat clean off. The others scattered, shouting. Smoke rolled between them, red from the fire, thick as sin. Mary's voice broke through the roar. Mr. Holt. He spun, two men climbing through the back window. Holt's left-hand gun barked twice. Both fell before their boots hit the floor. He turned back toward Bragg, but the yard was empty now. Only the sound of horses retreating into the canyon, then silence. The house crackled behind him, flames licking through the rafters. He kicked the door open, coughing through the smoke. Mary, a small voice answered, faint. Here. He found her crouched beneath the table, face streaked with soot, the ledger pressed to her heart. He grabbed her arm, pulling her into the open. The roof groaned overhead. Embers rained like fireflies. Come on, he shouted, dragging her toward the barn. They burst into the open air just as the roof collapsed. The house went up behind them, flames devouring everything he'd ever built. Mary looked back, tears cutting clean lines through the ash. You're home. Let it burn. They reached the barn. Inside, the horse stamped and snorted, terrified. Holt lifted Mary into the saddle. Ride west, like I said. I'm not. He cut her off, voice hard. You ride. You get that book to the marshal in Fort Gray. Tell him Bragg's name. She looked down at him, trembling. You'll die. He met her eyes. Maybe, but not tonight. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she leaned down, small hands gripping his arm. Please come with me. His voice softened, barely a whisper. Someone's got to hold the gate. He slapped the horse's flank. It bolted into the darkness, hooves pounding over stone. Holt turned back toward the ridge. The moon hung blood-red over Calder's Rest. He could see Bragg's men regrouping by the river, torches like stars against the black. He drew both revolvers, spun the cylinders, and stepped into the open. The wind tugged his coat, carrying the smell of ash and vengeance. Thunder rumbled somewhere far off. All right, boys, he muttered, voice like gravel in prayer. Let's dance. The gunfire came again, wild and bright, painting the night in flashes. Holt moved through it like a shadow that refused to die, each motion clean, ruthless, final. The last man dropped near the fence, torch falling from his hand. The fire hissed out in the dirt. Then silence. Holt stood alone under the blood moon, smoke drifting around him, chest rising slow. In the distance, Mary's horse disappeared into the canyon. He holstered one gun, turned toward the burning house. The other stayed in his hand, heavy as the past. For the first time in 15 years, Samuel Holt, the man the world called a crow, looked up at the red sky and didn't look away. The ridge glowed behind him, a grave of flame and dust. The wind whispered his name once before the night swallowed it whole. The street was silent, too silent. Even the wind had forgotten to move. Dust hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire, curling through the pale light of dawn. The red glow of the blood moon still lingered behind the ridgeline, painting the town in rust and shadow. Mary Calder stood in the center of Main Street. Her hat brim was low, her long duster coat flapping faintly around her boots. The girl, the one who'd whispered those trembling words days ago, stood behind a trough, her small hands gripping the edge as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the world. Across from them, 3 men fanned out. Bandits, the remnants of the Calder's rest gang. Their leader, Silas Vane, rolled his shoulders, the metal of his gun catching the moon's dying light. His face was carved with arrogance and the scars of too many victories. "You really think that coat's going to stop a bullet, Miss Calder?" His voice echoed like spurs scraping against stone. Mary didn't answer. Her hand hovered above her revolver. A single breath trembled in her chest. She could still feel the weight of her husband's rifle in the dirt behind the barn, the blood he'd coughed into her hands when the gang had come for them months ago. Silas smirked. "Tell you what, you hand over the girl, and maybe we let you keep breathing till sundown." Mary's eyes lifted, slow, cold, final. "She's under my coat now, Silas," she said softly, "and you're going to have to shoot through me to reach her." The street seemed to shrink, the space between them tightening like a noose. A creak came from a saloon's swinging doors. The townsfolk inside peered out, old men, scarred ranch hands, the barkeep polishing a glass with shaking hands. They knew this kind of silence. It was the kind that ended in death. Silas spat into the dust. "You ain't got the steel for this. You were just a ranch wife." Mary's fingers twitched. The wind picked up. Somewhere, a sign creaked on its hinge. The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she made no sound. Then Mary whispered, "You're right." For a split second, confusion flickered across Silas's face. Then her hand flashed. The revolver barked once. A single, clean sound that split the dawn in two. Silas staggered backward, eyes wide, blood blooming dark on his shirt. Before his men could draw, Mary was already moving, fast, fluid, like a ghost born of vengeance and dust. 2 more shots cracked through the silence. One man dropped to his knees. Another spun and fell face first into the dirt. The last outlaw tried to run. Mary didn't chase. She raised her gun, waited for him to clear the well, then fired once more. The echo rolled down the street and faded into the canyons beyond. Silas was still alive. Barely. He was crawling through the dust, leaving a dark trail behind him. His breath came in ragged bursts. Mary walked up slow, her boots stirring the dirt. He looked up at her, disbelief painted across his dying face. "You were supposed to be nothing to—" Mary knelt beside him, her revolver hanging at her side. "I was," she said, "till you took everything." He tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. The light in his eyes dimmed, and the world exhaled. Silence again. Only the soft sobbing of the little girl broke it. Mary turned, holstering her gun with a slow, steady motion. She walked to the girl, lifted her gently from behind the trough, and pulled her close beneath her coat. The child buried her face against Mary's chest. "It's over," Mary whispered. "Ain't no one gonna hurt you now." The sun crept up over the horizon, spilling gold across the blood-stained street. One by one, the townsfolk stepped out from hiding. They stared at the woman standing in the light, the black coat around her shoulders, the child clinging to her like a shadow. Old man Richter, the sheriff who hadn't worn a badge in years, tipped his hat. "Never thought I'd see another Calder walk Main Street," he said quietly. Mary didn't answer. She just looked past him toward the open plains where the blood moon was fading. The ghosts of her husband and son seemed to linger there, in the light, in the dust, in the quiet peace that comes after justice. By sundown, word had already begun to travel. They'd say a silent rancher woman, Mary Calder, face down the Calder's rest gang alone. They'd whisper that she drew faster than any man, that her hand didn't shake once. Some claimed the blood moon itself guided her aim. Others swore the girl she protected was kin to no one but heaven, sent to remind the plains what mercy looked like. And years later, when travelers rode through Dustfall Ridge, they'd still tell her story. They'd point to the bullet scars on the saloon's wall and say, "That's where Mary Calder stood, coat billowing, eyes cold as winter steel." And when the wind blew through the ghost town at dusk, folks swore you could still hear her voice, soft as a prayer, saying, "Stay under the coat, sweetheart. The storm's past now."